I had the wonderful opportunity of meeting with Michael Coles and to interview him about his successful career as an entrepreneur, as a family man, and he also told me during our interview about some of the faux pas, the mistakes, and things that can happen in business that we've all experienced as a small business owner. So join me for the complete interview with Michael Coles when he talks about when David meets Goliath. As an entrepreneur, philanthropist, environmentalist, you've worked with the state. Tell me about what makes you so successful.
Well, I think that, even at a very young age, I think that I've always had an ability to see the future in a lot of ways, not like a mystic, but in the way of understanding how things needed to grow and had a vision to be able to try to get people there. But I also learned at a very early age, probably through mistakes, that you can't do it by yourself, and that you've got to have a team of people that help you do it. But they can't do it if they don't understand where we're going. It's like trying to drive a car and have something over the windshield, where you can't see where you're going. People have to clearly understand where they're going, and they've got to buy into it. And if they don't, you won't get there. And so in all of the things that I've been able to take on, and many of them, I didn't know anything about the businesses or the industries or any of that, but I understood the fundamental of building a team who did understand how the businesses worked. And I'm a pretty quick study. I learned things pretty fast, but I think understanding how to take things forward is the most important thing that you can do. And again, having people who believe and understand where we're going.
And how did you go about finding the right team to put together for all of your projects?
Well, I've been very lucky. I mean, in the cookie company, when we started the cookie company, I think from past experience had learned that I knew what I didn't know. And so when I hired people, I always try to hire people who could teach me, as well as I could teach them on areas that maybe they weren't as familiar with. But I hired people that were always ahead of where we were as a company, because the one mistake that a lot of people make in building a business, they hire people for the moment. And you've got to hire people for the future. If you're going to get to a future, you've got to make sure that you've got the right people to get you there. And I've been able to do that in all the business I've created. Now, when I went to Caribou, it was a different story because the team was already there. Mm-hmm. And that was the most challenging, probably most challenging venture I've ever been involved in, because no one knew who I was. They didn't care about my past. They were all very secure in the way Caribou was being run, but the company wasn't growing. It wasn't moving where it needed to go. And there's a book that talks about that their good was their biggest obstacle, because they were very good, but they weren't great. Mm-hmm. And so I had to convince them that there was something beyond where Caribou was at the moment.
And how did you do that?
Actually, one of the things I did, I took the leadership team, which was about 17 people at the time, and we went on a field trip. And I took them to Caribou stores, and then I took them to Starbucks stores. And wonderful. Made them understand that the Caribou experience that they had in their head was being done by Starbucks and not being done by Caribou. And that we had to change that. That we had to make the Caribou experience much better than it was, but even much better than Starbucks experience. Because if we were going to differentiate ourselves taking on Goliath, the fact was that we had to give people a reason to come to Caribou. A much, much different experience.
You mentioned Goliath. Let's talk a little bit about your philosophy on taking on Goliath.
I've always wanted to be in the fortunate position of being involved in a business that actually was the leader. the cookie company became the leader. But we were taking on Goliath in the beginning because when we started the company, there were already 3 major chains of cookie stores. A lot of people think we started the business because we became the biggest. But when we started, there were 3 major chains. One had almost 100 stores, 2 had almost 50 stores. And so, we worked our way and eventually did become the biggest. But I always wanted to be involved in something that was big right from the beginning, the biggest right from the beginning. It's just never been that way.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
you made it the biggest.
Yeah, so it's always been kind of that, taking a few stones and a slingshot and stepping into the valley really to take on a giant. And it's always been a great challenge, and it's always been a lot of fun to figure out how to differentiate yourself and somehow be a disruptive company to get people to, in fact, to choose you. And you've got to that's a battle you keep on every day, because if you don't, someone will be there to take you down. And so you've got to keep people motivated, and you've got to, and one of the things I've found over the course of my career has been that if you survey people, we did a lot of it at Caribou, and you ask them what their number one complaint is in the company they work for, it will never be money. I've never seen it be salary. I've never seen that. It's always communication. They don't feel they know what's going on. And I think a lot of leadership make the mistake of not clearly defining the mission and getting people to understand why you're going in a particular direction.
So would you say then, whether it's a small company or a large multinational company, that the leader, the person at the top, needs to somehow touch by hand or face all of the employees to make them feel like they are part of the team?
Absolutely. It's not just, the CEO of the company has to be the major cheerleader of the business. But one of the responsibilities of the CEO is to make sure that every single person that's in a position of leadership carries the banner, lets people understand the mission. And it's got to be communicated all the way down to every single person within the business. And every person in the business has to feel important to the outcome. They've got to know what their piece is to the outcome. You've got all these people. And in a lot of ways, if you look at it, it would be like trying to be in a battle. And business is a battle. I mean, it's not like, business is different than being in a war. And it's all about the battles that you fight every day, whether you're going to win or whether you're going to lose. And you can't do it without soldiers, understanding what the mission is. And a lot of people miss that. They think if they send out an email now today, today would be an email.
Right.
If you're lucky, it might be something you stream into a video screen. I'm talking mostly retail or even any business, whether you're in the lawyer business, the banking business, or anything else. If you send out the message and think that's going to do it, forget it. There's got to be FaceTime with people. There's got to be a way to communicate where they really believe they in fact are being respected and in fact being an important player to the mission.
Well, that's a great segue into your love of education and in starting your leadership programs at Kennesaw State. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Kennesaw is very obviously very warm in my heart because and why I got involved in the very beginning, even this is going back before my wife and I endowed the business school. This goes back to like 1990. When Tim Mescon, in fact, was the dean of the business school. It was known as Entrepreneur U. And it was very different. A lot of schools now claim that. They all talk about, we're big on entrepreneurship. But, back in the day when Kennesaw's business school started, it was a real leader. It still is, because they've been able to continue to move it along and make it better. I was very intrigued by the fact that they were doing things out there that were just not happening anywhere else in the United States. I mean, they were doing incredible things. And so I have a very strong attachment to the business school and to Kennesaw over the years. I unfortunately, a lot of people probably don't know this. I never went to college. I never had the opportunity to do it. I had to work to help support my family as a kid, and then I had to work. Early on, I managed to get some breaks and go to work. I always planned to go to college, but it just never happened. But I've always understood how important education was. And, the things that I was able to do when I was 20, it's impossible to do today. The world's just different.
So you stress the education
absolutely
is a must.
Absolutely a must. And I know that, I've been very lucky, but I don't know how my life might have turned out. If probably some of the mistakes I made, I probably would have made others, but I don't know if I would have made some of the mistakes I made had I had a better education. And, I had great work experience, but I didn't have some of the skills that you'd learn going to a business school and moving along. And so it's great. And Kennesaw continues to innovate and create new programming. A lot of people may or may not know we've had programs that have been picked up by some of the biggest schools in the country that all came out of the business school at Kennesaw.
That's really incredible. And as you're talking, and you said that you did not attend college, and you have made some mistakes, but there's something about you that has allowed you to pick yourself up and go forward. It's a drive, and it's not just an A personality. It's something more than that. And I want to talk a little bit about your experience with the motorcycle accident and how that may have contributed to your drive in your career.
Well, when a number of years ago, before I actually created a talk called Taking on Goliath, I did a lot of speaking, especially at universities, a lot of universities and a lot of businesses, but a lot of university business schools. And I used to go around with one of those punching dolls, the kind you fill up with air and you hit it. And what I had done is I took that doll, and on the front of it I wrote the word entrepreneur, big letters. And before I would start talking, I would just slap it 2 or 3 times. It would fall down on the table and bounce up and fall. And I said, I don't have to talk. That's the whole lesson right there. It's not a question of whether you're going to get knocked down. You're going to get knocked down. The question is, you're going to get back up. And probably the biggest challenge I've ever faced in my life was my motorcycle accident, because I had understood what it was like to not have any money. I had understood what it was like to have to work very hard. But I had never had to face the idea of physically not being able to walk. And that took some strength and understanding that I had to frankly learn. And overcoming it, I think I found some strength within myself that I might not have ever found if it had not been for my accident. In fact, what could have been a tragedy turned out to be a real triumph for me.
And now you're a cyclist?
Was. Former cyclist. I still ride, but I used to race. I raced for a long time.
Well, you're a man of many interests, and I know that currently you are into fly fishing.
Yeah.
And you have created a contest, I believe.
Well, I didn't create it. No, there's a contest I do every year. I'm so surprised you're bringing this up. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Good.
I never get to talk about it. It's called the Jackson Hole One Fly. It started in 1987. It's considered the most prestigious fly fishing tournament in the world. This will be my 11th year competing in it. My team won it in 2011 and finished third last year. And it's a lot of fun. It is exciting. It's very different. And anybody in the audience that's listening to this who is a fly fisherman person will understand what I'm about to say. When it's called the one fly, because you pick a fly in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, one fly, you put it on, tie it on, you get to retie it. But if you lose that fly, it's over for the day. You can fish, but nothing counts. And it's not one fly of a particular pattern so that you can change. It's one fly that has to hold up all day. And it's exciting. It's very exciting. It's very different.
So it sounds like it's a lesson in adventure and perseverance and drive, and you're very competitive.
Yeah,
You want to win it.
It's so bad because when I fly fish all the other times, I'm not competitive. I just love being out on the water and all. But when I get into the one fly, my whole personality changes. It's all about winning and having a good time. But I think that's a philosophy that you take to business as well. I think you have to have a good time, but you've got to understand that it's still serious business.
Well, in addition to all of these accomplishments that you've had, you also have had time somehow to be involved in art, theater, environmentalism, even the state of Georgia's first film commissioner. Can you comment a little bit about your love for the arts and how that came about?
Well, I was not the first film commissioner. Actually, Jimmy Carter started the film commission back when he was governor, and it actually rolled along very strong. Back in the day when Burt Reynolds was living here, a number of movies, a lot of people were coming here to make movies, but it was before the days of tax incentives, because a lot of people saw the success that was happening in Georgia and started competing with them and finding ways to compete. And really, it's like any business. I mean, if you do something well, your competition is going to see what you're doing. They will not only duplicate it, but they'll figure out how to make it better. And so Georgia just got caught, in some ways, blindsided. And so for a number of years, the business just kind of floundered along. There was a commission, it kind of disappeared. And when Roy Barnes became governor, I went to Roy, and because I have such a great love for movies, and I knew the history of the film business in the state, and I literally asked if I could become the head of the film commission. And I think at the time, because there really wasn't a lot going on, I think he probably figured, well, what have I got to lose, you know? And we were good friends, and so I became the head of the film commission, and I quickly understood what we needed to do to get things back on track, which was, one, we had to get communities to understand the real economic impact of movies, that it just wasn't some fun business, that in fact it's real money and clean money, because there's no environmental impact. It does nothing but, bring money to hotels and to car rental companies and restaurants, and the list goes on and on and on. So I had to first go figure out a way to go communicate that message into those communities, and I spent a year on the road talking to Rotary clubs and chambers and places like that, talking about economic impact. And we worked very hard with legislators to put together the first tax incentive bill the state ever had, which we got passed, I think, in 2000, in the legislative session of 2000, and then things just began to dramatically change.
And we've just evolved ever since, and look at it
Well, the
today.
people that have continued to be involved in the film commission are, very dedicated, very, very good people. And I mean, it's amazing. It worked with a very small staff back then. I'm not sure the staff is much bigger today. I think
No,
there's only
it is
four
like four.
four people involved on the staff. And with $5 billion of economic impact today, it was about $1 billion something when I left, but it's grown much more
It's
than
phenomenal.
that. And the truth is, if the state would really put some real power behind it and increase that staff, Georgia could become number 2 in the United States. It's going to be hard to beat California, but Georgia could be number 2.
Sounds like we're on our way.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Well, transitioning to today, I know that you're executive chairman of Onboard
Global Onboard Partner.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Global is it's an interesting little company, and it's a little company, but we specialize in advertising on commercial airliners. Now, it's almost all outside the United States, but we basically can turn with proprietary methodology of doing it, we can go inside an airplane, the tube of the airplane, and turn it into somebody's brand. And it's been very exciting. It's been very, very hard because it's a different kind of business, a different way to advertise. A lot of people think it all has to be electronic, but electronic advertising is about the worst thing for a brand because they don't really get much exposure. First of all, you have to hope somebody's looking at the screen when it happens, and it has to be your ad that happens to be on at the moment they're looking at the screen. Ours is all static, so it's one thing at a time on the back of a tray table or overhead compartment or side panel, static advertising, and basically in some ways you could see it as a bad thing, but you're staring at it the whole time you're on the airplane. So from a impression standpoint, when people come off the plane, it's about 99% impression that people will, unaided can say to you, what brand did you see on the plane, and they can tell you. So
very interesting and very innovative. So
Yeah.
what's in store for your next adventure?
Well, I'm involved with Brand Bank, and
Yes.
that's exciting. And
Our presenting sponsor.
oh yeah, that's right. And this is a 109-year-old institution. Started in Gwinnett County, and we have offices in Gwinnett, and we have one location in Buckhead. And I've been involved for about 40 years, and it's been a lot of fun. This has been an interesting time to be in the banking business. But the thing that's great about Brand, it's big enough that it can do about anything a big bank can do, but it's still a community bank that has that local feeling where you're not a number.
That's what we need.
Where you're not a number, you're a person.
Right.
So.